this email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or
The
news.
single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Welcome to our 2026 mid-year highlights episode. It's hard to believe we're already halfway through the year. Over the past several months, we've had the opportunity to sit down with a remarkable lineup of guests, each bringing a unique perspective on leadership, teamwork, communication, accountability, and what it takes to perform at a high level. One of my favorite things about hosting this podcast is that every conversation teaches me something new, and I hope they've done the same for you. I'm incredibly thankful to our guests for sharing their time and expertise, and to all of you for continuing to be a part of this community. Before we focus on what's next, let's take a look back at some of the ideas and insights that made the first half of 2026 so memorable. First up, we'll hear from Joel Schwartzberg, communication coach, public speaking expert, and author of Get to the Point.
When I work with CEOs, often they start with the wrong question, but it seems right. And that is, what do I want to say today? That's the wrong question, especially internally. The right question is, what does my audience want and need to hear? And I just posted something on LinkedIn about this, because if you're not connecting with what they want and need to hear and understanding what they already know and need to supplement that, then you will be out of touch no matter how much you perfected your point. So it's a crucial part of that process. But you're right. Often speakers and communicators, they see it like a Christmas tree. And the more ornaments and details I add to it, the bigger it'll glow. I'm just giving you more and more and more and more ideas to understand the value of what I'm saying. What they don't understand is that when people receive multiple pieces of information, those pieces fight each other for your attention. And in that fight, the impact of each is diluted. I often say it like this, and I like these sort of fortune cookie sayings as long as they're substantial. If I tell you, Clint, a lot of things, you might remember none of them. If I tell you some things, you might remember some of them. If I tell you one thing, you will remember all of them.
Yeah.
So it's one idea, or at least one idea at a time.
No, I love that. In fact, I was emblazoned in my mind when I read that. I love that so much. Because it's kind of like the one where in my world where you do project work, we want one owner for every activity, because the old saying is anybody could have done it. Somebody should have done it. Nobody did it. And now everybody pays the price, right? I mean, so it's
everybody pays the price.
So I get it. You open the book with the idea most people don't have a point. And so maybe we can start by, because you have some great exercises in the book about fill in the blank and all that stuff. Maybe just educate the listeners on when somebody thinks they have a point, but it actually isn't a point. What makes a point a point?
Right. Well, in a broad sense, a point is not just an idea being shared. It is a proposition, a recommendation, a suggestion, an assertion. And we've come across these things before under different names. In colleges, we called it a thesis. In PR, we call it a key message. In executive communication, sometimes we call it an elevator pitch. But it's basically the boiled down argument, not like a Thanksgiving over the table argument, but what in debate we used to call an argument, a proposition, an assertion, not just a sharing of ideas. But I do want to share some of these exercises, and I'll preface it by saying I also teach this stuff to third graders through seventh graders in my community. And yes, I did say third graders. And so the things I'm about to share, I also share with them. So it just shows how basic they are. And the most important one is called the I believe that test. Basically, you take what you think is your point or your elevator pitch, your one sentence idea, you put the words I believe that in front of it, and you ask yourself one question. Is it now a complete sentence? Would it get a check plus from my fourth grade language arts teacher as a complete sentence, not a run-on, and certainly not a fragment? So let's take an example. Let's say podcasting. Is this a complete sentence? I believe that podcasting. No. But we hear people saying, what are you going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about podcasting. What about I believe that the value of podcasting? Nope. I believe that the importance or the future of podcasting. Nope. These aren't complete sentences. It forces you to say something like, I believe that podcasting will be the most effective way to attract our millennial audience. Now you have a complete sentence and it makes you go, go on, because you're sort of interested. I'm interested in capturing a millennial audience. We haven't done such a good job with them. But how do I do it? I see. I do it with the podcast.
Next up, we have Dr. Vanessa Dreskat, Associate Professor at the University of New Hampshire and author of The Emotionally Intelligent Team.
So systems are about interaction. So the power of the system, if you think about a mechanical system, right? One that's the one that powers your car. You don't have all these pieces side by side. You have them interacting. And it's those interactions that create the beauty of the engine, get the car going. Well, individuals in the team are need to interact. But here's the catch that most people don't realize. Every interaction you have inside or outside of a team generates emotion. That's what emotional intelligence is. It's picking up on those interactions. But when you've got a team, everybody's having an emotional reaction to everyone else in the team. And so you have to really recognize that you've got to build an emotionally comfortable and an environment that basically meets the emotional needs of the individuals, so you can check that box and move on to a relentless focus on the task, move on to the project management. But if you don't focus on that early stuff, if you don't take care of the individuals so that they'll continue to interact in an effective way, then you're going to run into problems. And I would say that one of the biggest ahas people have from reading the book or from getting to know team emotional intelligence is just really the critical importance of spending some time building the needs or satisfying the needs of the individuals, which is about building relationships, trust.
I'm going to get these numbers wrong because I don't have them in front of me, but I was, I guess, not surprised, but a little bit surprised at the emotional neural network processes, I think 11 million data points a second, and the cognitive one only does like 4,000 a second or something, if I remember. Something.
Oh, no, the cognitive one is more like 20 or 30.
It's ridiculously small. Yeah.
It's really, because it's meant to be, higher order thinking. But the emotion, we basically have what neuroscientists consider two systems in the brain. And, they simplify it by talking about two systems. One is the emotion system, and one is the sort of the IQ cognitive brain. We evolved first. Our ancestors just used the emotion system. We didn't have language, right? We actually had tougher problems to solve, like the Ice Age and such. We grew a bigger brain. We grew a bigger cognitive brain, but we never let go of our emotion brain. And so we pick up, in order to save our lives, we pick up 11 million bits of information per second. And the other thing that's really interesting is that before you even enter the room of a team or enter the online Zoom or whatever you're using to meet people with, people are prepping their brains already. The brain is prepping the person for what they're going to find. And you don't miss a trick. When people don't listen to you, when people don't seem to care about you, when people ignore you, they don't miss it. And it scares the brain. The brain is designed to save your life, and it occupies attention that keeps you, it creates conformity, it occupies what you could be using to think and contribute to the team. So anyway, this is again another contribution when we talk about team emotional intelligence, why you need to meet these individual needs that calm the brain down, that make you feel like you belong, you matter here, this is who you are here. And we value you, and then boom, 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 you can make mistakes and you can be more innovative, et cetera, et cetera.
Now let's hear from David Allen and Ed Lamont, co-authors of the award-winning book, Team, Getting Things Done with Others.
As the leader of the team, or as eating on the team, once you have, gotten clarity in a particular area, the temptation is to think, well, we did that, and move on, right? So we don't need to discuss that anymore. But certainly as the leader, and certainly with, things like direction and goals, and basically you need to bore yourself talking about things like vision, like the I think in marketing, it's something like, people are not going to buy anything until they've been touched 8 times. Well, I would say, it's probably twice that or 3 times that in the domain of vision. People aren't going to buy your vision until they've heard it over and over and over and had the chance to ask those clarifying questions, so that each time that comes up, they're kind of laying down a new layer of taking a sketch and turning it into a painting. Right. So they've got to see the thing. And the first time you describe it, they get a sketch. And the 4th time they've got, a sketch with a bit of shading. And by the 40th time, they've got a serious, multi-color painting that they've fallen in love with.
Right.
And then you've got the energy engaged.
Yeah. I want to touch on something you said a few minutes ago before I move on. And you mentioned, I'm gonna change your words a bit, but basically you're saying don't let perfection be the enemy of good enough, right? So you're trying to make it perfect and wordsmith it to death. And you actually, in the book, you give the example of when you're writing this book, you had what you called maybe not so great drafts. You'd pass back and forth and eventually go to the editor, and then you get better drafts. And so we always want to strive for perfection. I get that, but I do find that people get stuck with wanting things to be perfect. And then at some point you have to say, look, we have enough. We should just move on. Let's just get going.
And that flexibility is more and more required these days. People often ask me, they say, David, what's new these days, especially with technology and everything else? I say, there's nothing new except how frequently things are new. That's what's new. I mean, your parents probably did not have to rethink their life and their career more than 2 or 3 times if they did that at all.
Yeah.
Now, Clint, you're going to have to do that weekly. or certainly a lot more frequently. Think about it, because there are opportunities that show up that you can't even see yet.
Yeah.
And so I think it was Richard Branson or somebody, maybe he stole it from somebody else. We said there is no luck. There's only lots of preparation and then taking advantage of opportunities as they show up.
I love that. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Next is Whitney Johnson, best-selling author of Smart Growth and one of the top management speakers in the world. I'll tell you a quick story. So when I was going to Georgia Tech, it's not a very easy school.
No.
And I was studying electrical engineering. And there were times when I'm like, because I was also an older student. I was in the Navy first. I was 24, 25 when I got there. I'm like, this is just too much. I'm just going to go get a job somewhere. And there was a house on the way home from between where I was living with my brother and school. And I would pass this beautiful house and think, if I ever want to live in a place like this, I got to finish I got to graduate. And I would sit there sometimes in that front of the house, just to your point, that image was burned in my head to the point where one day I got embarrassed because the owners came home and I was in my car at the very end of the driveway by the street. I had to back out so they could get in. But that house is probably a huge reason why I graduated.
That's beautiful. That's a great example. Yeah. You had this image of what you wanted to be and how you wanted to be. And so it got you through. Yeah. And you could have said house with 5 bedrooms. That wouldn't have even done anything compared to that visual image, because you could, there's a wonderful saying, if you can see it, you could be it. And it's true.
Mm-hmm. And semantics matter. And you actually talk in the book, there's a difference between I run and I'm a runner. Can you elaborate a bit?
I would love to elaborate on that. So I love this stuff so much. So it's based on the work of Gregory Walton, who wrote a paper called Psychologically Precise Interventions. At the time, he was a professor at Stanford. He probably still is. And he talked about the power of our words. So remember, I was talking about your subconscious versus your conscious mind. You use your conscious mind to reprogram your subconscious mind. And so what he did is he found that when people used nouns instead of verbs, they could reprogram themselves. So if they would say, I run, that's a verb for everybody who doesn't remember their English. And I am a runner, which is a noun. And what they found, they were talking about voting and voters, that they increased the voter turnout percentage significantly, like by 13 percentage points. And the reason that happened is it shifted people's identity. So if you say I run versus I am a runner, I start to believe, this goes back to those images that we were just describing, I am a runner. Well, what does a runner do? And it starts telling your body and your mind that you need to be doing things that runners do. And so it moves you and impels you to action in a way that the I run does not. Also, I do think it's interesting. if you look at both, Deepak Chopra talks about this. So I think it's the Hindu tradition, and also there's a phrase, Hosam, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is I am. And then also in the Christian tradition, you think about the words I am, it's another name for Jesus. And so you're evoking this tremendous creative power. So you can use it from an academic perspective, but there's also from a faith or spiritual perspective. Those words I am are incredibly powerful and creative in terms of you take those images and those words, and that starts that self-talk, and those technicolor pictures start to really give you that momentum and ability to visualize yourself already at the top of the curve. So of course you'll get there.
Now we'll hear from David Aker, known as the father of modern branding and best-selling author of 18 books. So why do you think stories are so powerful when it comes to branding and leadership?
Well, I don't think I know. There's enormous research on stories in psychology and in English and so on. And it turns out that if you can formulate a fact in a story and compare it with just telling that facts, the degree of memory is many times more, not just 20% more, but 3 or 4 or 5 times more. And there's hundreds of studies to show this. There's hundreds of studies that show that if you go to a talk and the speaker starts out, I'm going to start with a story, your ears perk up.
Right.
It's going to be interesting. Instead of they start out, well, this thing, my talk has 3 points and I'm going to make these 3 points. But if you start out with a story, it's a whole different, your attention is just far more. And one of the things that, I've thought a lot about how do you communicate in today's environment with this, polarization of opinions, this information overload that's just enormous, and and this rampant skepticism. So how do you communicate that? Well, one of the things you need to do is to divert people from counter-arguing. And one way to do that is to either put it in a story, or let the story motivate it, or let the story illustrate it. But if there's a story there people, how are you going to argue against a story? It's just a story. And that's a really important role of a story.
Next up is Brian Bureau, world-class motivational speaker and multi-time best-selling author.
You hear as a swimming coach, people talk about swimming being an individual sport. You could not be more wrong. I used to feel it every day in practice when our kids work together, each with their own strength. When they work together, as honest to gosh as if we had a massive current, a massive wave pushing them faster. And whenever we separated and we just got selfish and just focused on ourselves, it's like we had to turn and swim into that. So swimming that current, slowing us down. So every business is a team sport. And what we're trying to do is to get that wave, that current to drive us forward, which only comes when we care about each other and we recognize each other's contributions and roles. John Wooden was probably one of the greatest team builders of all time. For any listeners who don't know who John Wooden was, he coached UCLA basketball from 1948 to 1975. His teams at UCLA won 10 national championships in 12 years. Perspective, no other coach in men's history's won more than 5 in a career. Coach Wooden won 10 in 12 years, but talk about a humble man. He would have been the first to tell you he didn't win any in the first 27 years that he coached. He used to say it's what you learn after you know everything that makes the difference. But Coach Wooden, in his day, only played 7 players typically in games. He had 14 players on a team. That means half the team never got on the game floor. Their career was played on the practice floor, challenging the starters. And yet everyone on those teams felt important. Everyone on those teams felt they had a valuable role that was just as important as anybody else's. And that was because he understood the dynamics of yes, everyone has something to bring to the table. He used to use the metaphor of a car. He said, he coached Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Okay, he's the engine, but guess what? An engine ain't going to do anything if you don't have wheels. And wheels might be, the third player. He says, guess what? Those wheels will fall off without lug nuts. And those lug nuts may be those 7 guys who never got in. So the whole thing depends on each other.
Now let's go to Paula Davis, founder and CEO of the Stress and Resilience Institute and author of Beating Burnout at Work.
So I always tell people, I joke, I say, if you're not someone who says thank you a lot, start there, because the phrase a little thanks goes a long way really does apply if you don't ever hear it. So start there. But this is a strategy. This is a skill that can take like 2 minutes, a minute and a half. So it's free, not a big, output of time. But I give the example of talking about when I finished my first year of law school. I clerked for a judge and I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. I felt lost with a lot of the stuff that he was assigning to me. And he gave me this project that was really complicated. I did it and I turned it in. And I walked into my office a couple of weeks later and he had a note on my chair and he said, "Thank you so much for your report. The way that you summarized the cases helped me be able to see a really easy way that I could rule. Just wanted to say thanks." That's like literally all it says. And I still have the note in my office. And this was 20 plus years ago. So it's that extra piece. It's like naming the behavior that you saw that led to the good outcome. So that when he said, the way that you organize those summaries helped me see the takeaways very clearly. That was it. That's the sticky part. That's the part that signaled to me like, wow, you really read this thing that I gave you. And you had to kind of like slow your roll in order to be able to meaningfully convey that back to me. And that's what makes it so extraordinary and so sticky, because we don't hear that hardly at all. So it's not a difficult skill in terms of actually doing it. It's difficult in that we have to, in the unmanageable workload and other chaotic environments that we find ourselves in at work, slow down enough to recognize moments where we could deliver that kind of feedback.
So we've talked about this a couple times now, but there's this roadblock of people saying they're too busy to say thank you or to recognize others, or as I've been known to say, I give you feedback every 2 weeks to say you're doing a good job. It's called a paycheck. Yep. So how do we help leaders see the value in taking that pause that refreshes and basically says thank you plus?
This has been one of the more interesting aspects of this segment in particular when I talk to leaders, because they'll oftentimes be very, very blunt with me. And a lot of them, I think, recognize the importance of it or what have you, but, they love to push back. And, I think for a lot of folks, we're so worried about making the numbers or making sure something doesn't happen or preventing the error or the mistake that we don't take the time to then amplify what's going right. So there's that component of it. There's also there's not a sense of urgency around this, or not a perceived sense of urgency, right? It's like, oh man, if I don't say thank you this week to someone, I bet they're going to leave. Like we don't think that. And then other leaders have gotten into more of the conversation around, well, this feels like, everybody gets a snowflake, or now we just all have to kind of like sit around and like kumbaya it out or whatever. But I appreciate the frankness. But what I always say back to them, no matter what, is that this isn't about stroking someone's ego. This is about really conveying to people what they're doing well in a succinct way that activates just like this whole cascade of positive psychological fuel that at the end of the day, if we're going to talk dollars and cents, is going to make you more money. So to say nothing of the fact that it's going to be beneficial in other ways from a motivational and a well-being standpoint.
Next up, we'll hear from Mark Fava, former U.S. Navy officer and author of Lessons from the Admiral. As an admiral's aide, what exactly was your role? What did you do?
Yeah, I talk a lot about that in the book. And again, your number one responsibility was to make sure that the admiral's day from the beginning to the end, it was executed flawlessly, right? And that meant something maybe as trivial as, making sure they got a ride on time or making sure they got to point A to point B on time, which wasn't trivial, but helping with speeches, going to meetings with them. something as simple as we're getting ready to walk into a room and meet somebody who I know he met 6 months ago. And as we're walking, I would just say, now, you met Captain Jones 6 weeks ago. Remember his wife's name is Janie, blah, blah, blah. And he'd walk right up and, hey, Captain, hey, how you been? It's been about 6 weeks since we saw each other. How's your wife Janie doing or something? I mean, that's it. To the extent you can make their lives, which are incredibly hectic, better, and the execution of what they want to do more flawless, that's what you do. And it was phenomenal because I say this in the book. When I got the job, he said, you're going to do some things that are well below your pay grade, aren't going to be fun. You're going to do some things that are well above your pay grade. Because I was just a lieutenant, right? I'd only been in four years. And on the staff, everybody outranked me. But he said, I need you to do both equally well. So, do the crappy job well, do the high visibility job well. No difference as far as he was concerned.
So I imagine, since that role has some importance to it, that it's probably reserved for people with bright futures, and you must have demonstrated some high potential to get nominated for that position. What early experiences really shaped your approach to leadership, even before you became an officer?
Yeah. Gosh, I think clearly my book is dedicated to my mom and dad. So clearly, the work ethic of my parents, the integrity, the faith of them, and then the ability not to accept a door that closes to you, right? And that was really it. And then the old hit the deck running. So even before the admiral told me to do the crappy job as well, when I got to my first squadron in Jacksonville as a lieutenant junior grade, all my buddies got, you're going to be a division officer in the maintenance, you're going to be an assistant ops, you're going to be this, that, and the other, and they had to lead troops. And they looked at me and said, Mark, you're going to be the navigations, logs, and records officer. I said, what's that? They said, all you got to do is take care of the chart room and then make sure everybody's flight time gets put in their logs. And they said, right now it's a mess. We're behind. The chart room's terrible. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, I went to college and got a degree and got wings to go do this. But I turned it into with the help of a chief, I turned it into the best chart room in the hangar. We updated everything. We had to update inventory charts that were out of date, which were not good, were updated. Everybody's logbooks were then accurate. And that's a big deal for the pilots, not as big for the naval flight officers. And that was it. I mean, just that hit the deck running very early on, established a reputation that carried me through the next 3 years of the squadron. And I tell people that all the time. Boy, you come out strong early, that's what people remember. You come out poor as a doofus early, it's very difficult to recover.
Now let's hear from Joel Zeff, keynote speaker, workplace culture expert, and author of Make the Right Choice. So what is the idea behind the term ta-da?
So ta-da, when a magician finishes, ta-da, when he finishes his act, it's a flourish. It's a look what we accomplished. And ta-da is, just kind of you finish something. You're excited. Look what we just did. Ta-da. And so when our kids were younger, everything was a ta-da. And I'm sure lots of people do this. Everything was a ta-da. You celebrate everything. You might not say ta-da, but you celebrate everything when your children, the first time they hold a spoon, the first time they hold their sippy cup, the first time they stand up, the first time they they eat their lunch. You're like, ta-da, you did it, buddy. You ate all the strawberries. Ta-da. And you're just really excited. And so I brought that to my keynotes. And when you're little, you celebrate everything. And then you get older and there's still celebration, but it's fewer. And it's, as you get older, fewer and fewer moments. And then when you're adults and you're working in your career, there's hardly any celebration. Maybe once a year we get together and give out a pointy glass award and have a nice chicken dinner with some rice pilaf. And we need to celebrate more. And every day is filled with these ta-da moments where we should celebrate. And that celebration fuels our passion. It fuels our confidence. Remember when your children, for those listening, when your children were younger and you celebrated something, you gave them a big ta-da, you said, great job. They got a big smile on their face. Their eyes got big. Their body language, it was confidence.
They've achieved something. Yeah.
Exactly right. They achieved something. And whatever you're celebrating, they're going to do more of because they wanted mom and dad to give them that positive support again. And so it builds confidence that they try new things, they take risks, think about going to the bathroom for the first time. Huge ta-da.
Yeah.
When was the last time, Clint, you walked out of the bathroom and went, ta-da?
It's been a minute.
Okay, well, you should. Things are working. But that ta-da is a celebration. And we don't celebrate enough because it fuels our passion. And even though you love what you do, you love what you're doing, and you still have days where you get frustrated and you get impatient and you get stressed out. And then where's our fuel for our success? Our fuel to be a great leader, a great teammate, a great communicator, a great innovator. And we have to have that fuel. It has to come from somewhere. I think one of the places it comes from is celebrate, giving people positive support, celebrating yourself, giving appreciation, which in the book we talk about it being a gift. It's the best gift you can give anybody, to say, thank you, and I appreciate you. You did a great job. We don't do that enough. Barely takes any time, doesn't take any money, just to say thank you and I appreciate you. And the challenge I talk about in my keynotes is every day when you go home from work, think about all the people that you had contact with. And as you go home from work and you said, did I give the people that deserved it that appreciation and positive support? And if you didn't, then tomorrow, I don't care, text, email, call them up. There's a million ways to connect with people, right? Say thank you and I appreciate you. And it means a great deal. It's a gift, and it fuels our passion. And that's the ta-da, celebrating these moments.
Up next is MJ Clark, Vice President at Integrated Leadership Systems and author of Leading Through Listening. So in the book, you talk about how many professionals either talk too much or stay too quiet, both often driven by insecurity. What was the moment in your own career when you realized that listening, not talking, was actually the leadership skill that mattered most? Because you have a very personal story, which I loved.
Yeah, a mentor of mine actually gave me that feedback. And this person told me I was of the flavor of talking too much. And this person shared with me that he said, everything you're saying is good. It's just that it's too much of it. So he said, it's all good stuff. It was so helpful to me. And I really didn't know how to take it at first. And then the more I thought about it, I thought, wow, that took a lot of guts for that guy to say that to me. So I really, really appreciated it. And it's been a long journey of working on listening, honestly. It took a long time to get through the urge to say something. And again, Clint, you asked about my backstory. Growing up in a family of 15 kids, everybody was talking over everybody,
I'm sure.
So getting airtime was vital. So I think that's a lot of what put me down that path initially, is just background, which we all deal with.
Well, I think I was really impressed by the fact that if somebody told me, Clint, you talk too much, my initial reaction might be to not say anything then, to go the opposite direction. And the fact that you could actually hear that feedback, process that feedback, and then not go the opposite direction was impressive.
Yeah, I think it's very hard feedback to give, honestly. So I think hearing it was tough, but the more I thought about it, the more I appreciated the bravery that it took to say it, because you don't know what you're going to get. And there are a lot of reactive people who initially will not respond favorably to that.
And finally, we'll hear from Wes Adams, founder and CEO of SV Consulting Group and co-author of Meaningful Work.
Improv is, sort of grounded in this yes and mindset, right? When your scene partner or somebody else in the group says something or leans into a character, the sort of core rule of improv is you never push back against that. You build on it. You say yes to what that person is doing, and you add your own elements to that. And I think there's when we're talking about how to collaborate as a team, that's a really important concept to lean into. Very often we look for ways to shut people down. You'll say something, I'll be like, I don't really think that what you said about trust is true, and that is not really going to encourage you to continue bringing good ideas to the table. And it's also not going to be great for our relationship because you're going to feel kind of shut down by me. And that's not to say that every idea that you bring to the table is going to be a great idea. and we should always like follow that that thinking. But there are ways that we can bounce ideas off each other without shutting each other down.
It doesn't have to be verbal. It can also be the eye roll and the posture, the lean back in your chair, cross your arms, like, oh, here we go.
Body language says a lot. Yeah.
So research has found that in the most effective teams, what really matters is not who is in the team or on the team, but how well the team welcomes different ideas, which was a bit surprising to me. So why is that?
So this, I think, comes from Google's Project Aristotle study, which Amy Edmondson led. And, she's the one of the leading authorities on psychological safety. And just a little bit of background on that is that, they studied, or her team studied a lot of teams across Google, hundreds of different teams, and tried to, deconstruct what made a high performing team. So I think they looked at 150 or 200 different elements, and a high level of psychological safety was the biggest predictor of a high performing team. And what that meant was that everybody was actively bringing ideas to the table. They felt safe talking about what was really going on. And I can't remember if it was this study in particular or a related study, but there's also this idea of airtime, right? So in the teams where one person was talking for, 50 or 80% of the time, and then other people were not, usually like the leader or the boss in that group, the performance was lower, and it was much higher when there was equal airtime, like everybody was talking about things, bringing things to the table. And I think that's, and we know from other research that, teams with diverse views and backgrounds perform better because you're looking at things from a different point of view. It's that, I don't know if you know that old like parable of the blind men and the elephant, right? Do you know that one?
I don't know that one.
It's like it's a bunch of blind men and they encounter like an elephant for the first time. And, they're like, what is it? And one guy's, he's like feeling the tail. He's like, I think it's a snake. And the other guy's, feeling one of the feet. He's like, no, it's a tree. And, the other guy's feeling like the tusk. He's like, no, it's a spear. And you can't like get the 360 view. You can't get the whole picture unless everybody's sharing their piece of it, because you don't have all of the information, right? There's this fallacy that we know what's going on, or that we have all of the information. And that when we create a psychologically safe environment and other people can bring their ideas to the table, we learn about a lot of things that we don't know about.
As we wrap up this special mid-year episode, I want to thank all of our guests for sharing their experiences, expertise, and hard-earned lessons with us. Every conversation has offered a unique perspective, and I know I've come away from each one with new ideas to think about and apply. I also want to thank you for listening. Whether you've been with us from the beginning or just recently discovered the podcast, I appreciate you spending part of your day with us. The first half of 2026 brought some incredible conversations, but we're just getting started. We have a great lineup of guests and topics coming up in the months ahead. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation with all of you. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.